like aliens made us, right? That's going to be, I feel like that's a disclosure.
Well, yeah, when somebody says something, it's not your job to refute what they say, it's their job to support what they say.
You say that evil can exist without good,
Right.
which I believe is true, but how do we specifically know that that good is God? Because you said that we wouldn't know that like murdering or war and stuff like that is wrong without God, but people who don't believe in God, like Muslims or Hindus or like the ancient Greeks, they also thought that stuff like that was wrong. So if it comes from God, then why do people who didn't know God think that?
Okay, great question. When we say that murder is wrong because God exists, we are not saying that people who don't believe in the God of the Bible don't know murder's wrong. It's not a question of what we call epistemology, how do we know? It's a question of what we call ontology. Why does the thing called the moral law exist in the first place, regardless of how we know it? In fact, according to Romans 2, Paul says the Gentiles do not have the law of the law written on their hearts. In other words, people intuitively know right and wrong because God has written it on their hearts, whether they believe in God or not. That's why virtually every culture agrees on certain big moral principles, because God has written it on their hearts, whether they believe in Him or not. So, C.S. Lewis points that out in the book Abolition of Man, and others have pointed that out as well. So it's not how do I know right and wrong, it's why is there a right and wrong to begin with, and that right and wrong is God's nature. That's what all theologians will say, philosophers will say, whatever we call good, that's what we mean by God, God's nature. Now, a lot of times when I'm debating an atheist, they'll say, well, I can be a good person, and I can know right from wrong, to which I respond, yes, I agree with that. I'm not saying you can't be good, and I'm not saying you don't know what good is. What I'm saying is you can't justify what good is unless God exists, because there's no purpose to life, and there's no standard of objective morality outside of yourself. Maybe an illustration would help. Let's say you go outside, you're driving down the street, and you see speed limit signs, 70 miles an hour, right, out on the highway here. You can know what that speed limit is, and you can drive the speed limit while at the same time denying there's a traffic authority, right?
Right.
But that speed limit sign wouldn't be there unless there was a traffic authority. The same thing is true with God. You can know it's wrong to murder and wrong to rape and wrong to steal and deny God exists, but it wouldn't really be wrong to murder, to rape, or steal unless God exists.
You said before that nature is a jerk. What do you mean by that, and what does that tell us about ethics?
Well, if you were to scour the entire natural world, you're never going to stub your toe on some morality. Nature doesn't have moral facts like that. Nature doesn't have stuff, just if you added up all the facts that describe how nature is, you're never going to stumble on some ought, some moral ought. That's not the same category. It's a fundamentally different something. Some animals we found can have charitable behavior, altruism, and some animals eat their young. Nature does what it does. And if you're going to look to nature to get your morality, you're going to be looking for a while before you find anything, and I don't know that you're going to find anything. Now, there are arguments people try to make that you can somehow, without God, get to morality, but I have yet to find any that actually escape what's called the is-ought problem. How do you go from is, the facts of what is, descriptions, to what ought to be, prescriptions? If we get down into, you might say, the metaphysics, the moral ontology, going to drop some big words on you. If you want to get down into what do we mean by ought, what ought to be, that's a weird relationship. You're never going to bang atoms together enough and get ought. You're never going to get lions hunting enough to get some ought. You're never going to grow some trees and the fruit is some ought. That's not what you can get from nature. Ought is a hypothetical type of category. It's talking about something that may never ever exist in the natural world. Ideally, we should have world peace. That's what we ought to strive for, but that's never happened before. So it's not a natural fact. It probably won't happen, given natural forces, probably won't ever happen in nature. And so how do we have that kind of a category in reality as some sort of reference point for our behavior if nature doesn't have that? And so to bridge from the natural facts is to the moral ought, you're going to need something that can handle oughts. You're going to need a mind. And I would contend that you need a divine mind if you're going to have an ought of that kind of scope, that even people can be accountable to them. Because we can understand ought, we can understand hypotheticals, we can understand should, but our minds are more of nature if we're just evolved wet meat machines. And so our minds don't actually resolve the problem if we're just determined by blind, indifferent natural forces too. And so when I say nature is a jerk, I'm talking about how nature is red in tooth and claw and is a terrible reference point for getting our morality.
Whenever there's a school shooting or something like that, you will assume the perpetrator was crazy. The state assumption.
One of the distancing techniques that people often use when they see some great tragedy, a school shooter, a genocide, Holocaust, something terrible, it's a bit too convenient to say, oh, they were crazy. Only crazy people do that. But biblically speaking, depravity is found in every human heart. And the seeds of evil are planted in all of us. Now, I'm not saying everybody's going to go out and be an axe murderer, but I think there is a chilling reality in that perpetrator is not a whole lot different from you or me. That perpetrator, that school shooter, we're just one or two circumstances away from being in their shoes. Now, that's not supposed to say everybody's about to go do something wild and crazy, but it is supposed to point out to us that we need humility and we need honesty in our politics, in the way we vote, in the way we conduct ourselves in civilization. It's been said that civilization is a thin crust atop of a volcano. And I think that is what Thomas Sowell would call the tragic vision of the conservative. And from a Christian standpoint, when we have depravity in our own hearts, we have to recognize that it's more natural for us to be sinful than to be humanitarian. It's more natural for us to be selfish than for us to be selfless. And recognizing that, we have to step back from that and recognize that school shooter or that genocidal maniac, those things happen in bureaucratic, modern, constitutional societies. People forget that the democides, that is government-based killing, that happened in Russia and in China and under Mussolini in Italy, those happen in constitutional republics, modern governments, and yet hundreds of millions dead. How could that happen? Well, it's because you don't need a whole lot of crazy people to facilitate evil in society. You need compliant masses. And that does happen. That happens all over the place, and I would contend that's happening right now in America because the deadliest act against fellow human beings is ongoing right now, and many of the compliant masses are turning a blind eye, and it's abortion. In the US alone, we've aborted 10 times as many as were killed in the Holocaust already, and it's still counting. And so if we want to look at that school shooter or Hitler or Mussolini or Stalin or Lenin or Mao and say, oh, I could never be like that, they're crazy, recognize that's what we look like plus a few circumstances. And it's there, but by the grace of God, do we not go there?
Frank Turek faced through questions, but enlightened us you hit his answers.
The news articles of releasing UFOs and the disclosure and all this kind of thing, it answers a decent number of those questions, like say the science even created that we know is provided by the disclosure. The UFO aliens came, they seeded the earth, that whole thing. What is your argument to those folks? I need
something. What? What are they saying?
Like aliens made us, right? That's going to be. I feel like that's a disclosure.
Well, yeah. When somebody says something, it's not your job to refute what they say. It's their job to support what they say.
I'm just wondering if you have an answer that I could borrow.
Well, my answer would be, what evidence do you have for your position? Aliens, because you're the one making the positive claim to your friend.
Yeah.
Aliens brought us here. What
Oh, no,
evidence do you have for that? And if
I'm
you-
not making that claim.
I know,
just
your
I
friend
see the
does.
news people doing it, and I just see that
Well,
being like
look, is this supposed to explain why life is here? Is that the idea?
right.
Well, it just puts the question off another step. Who created the aliens? Because aliens are not eternal. They're inside the universe. The universe had a beginning. So if aliens brought us here, and by the way, this was a serious proposal for a while called panspermia,
Yeah.
meaning seeds everywhere, that many years ago some evolutionists said, we can't figure out how life began, so aliens must have brought life here. They seeded this planet. Well, they're just putting the question off one step. Who created the intelligent aliens who brought life here? They're not getting rid of the problem of the origin of life. They're just putting it a step back. All right?
Yeah,
So
pretty easy.
I would just ask them, well, who made those aliens, even if you're right? You're not getting rid of the need for some sort of creator.
Thank you.
All right? Thanks, Rick.
Yeah.
Bill, I get this question a lot. Well, evolution just gives us morality. Can you give us a response or two to that?
Now, that's an argument that I use in support of the first premise. If God does not exist as a transcendent standard for good and evil, then moral values are just the spin-offs of biological and sociocultural evolution. So they're absolutely right, what these students say. If atheism is true, it seems to me that's all moral values are. And if you were to rewind the film of human evolution and shoot the film over again, a very different kind of creature, very different set of moral values might have evolved. And so who are we to say that our values are right and theirs are wrong? There's no basis for it.
You know, it's interesting, Bill, and I know you have that little video on the absurdity of life without God. In this whole coronavirus situation, there is nobody on the atheist side or the Christian side saying, you know what, it's just survival of the fittest. Let's just let the virus take out the unfit people, and the fittest will survive. So even atheists, someone like Richard Dawkins, who says that there is no evil, there is no good, we just dance to our DNA, even he admits that a Darwinian type morality is something we ought not live by. Where is he getting a standard by which to say that, Bill?
That's exactly right. I mean, Dawkins is an undying moralist. He gives lip service to relativism and moral nihilism, but he can't live that way. And so the God delusion is filled with moral judgments for which there's no basis. And in fact, I've argued, as you probably know, Frank, that it's really impossible to live consistently and happily within an atheistic framework. Nobody can live consistently and happily as though his life were valueless, purposeless, and meaningless.
Okay, I agree that the universe began some dozen billion years ago, but in your dichotomy about someone or no one creating something out of nothing, you assume that the universe was in fact created out of nothing. But I think maybe this is a bad inference. I agree that whatever begins to exist has a cause, but the universe is uniquely an exception because there was never a time when the universe didn't exist. So it's literally been here for all time. Therefore, even though the universe had a beginning, it doesn't need a cause. So if a timeless God exists, he has no cause, but we can just say instead that the universe itself has no cause and we have no need to infer a creator.
Okay, but what created time, space, and matter?
I'm saying nothing. It wasn't created. It's always been here for all time.
You're doing a play on, you're equivocating on the word for all time, okay? Because, yes, time began, but that would require a cause for time to begin. And the cause, therefore, then must be timeless. Yes, you're basically saying the universe has always existed as long as time has existed. And the reason for that is because the universe was created with time. We live in a space-time fabric, according to Einstein. And space-time and matter are correlative. They came into existence together. The question is, what caused space-time and matter to come into existence together? If you're going to say no one, then you're giving up on the ultimate principle of science, and that is the law of causality. So if it was true that God created the universe, would you follow him?
Well, this was a devil's advocate. I'm a committed Christian.
Okay. I never dreamed a Christian would lie to me.
Sorry. Thank you.
All right, thank you.
you.